So this is, of course, Rob's first stop on his international book tour for his retrospective he did on the Mavs. Talk about that. How's the reception been to your book, and where can we buy it?
I mean, the reception so far has been pretty phenomenal from people on Twitter, Facebook, everywhere. My family is kind of going a little nuts about it, probably a bit too nuts. But it should be in stores this Friday, especially in Texas, and particularly in the Dallas area. And you can order it on Amazon, on Barnes and Noble, and all that. I mean, it's just calling it a book might be a bit generous. It's really just kind of a gratuitous magazine with lots of pretty pictures and some of my text in there. So, but I mean, hopefully it's a good read for casual fans and real basketball fans. Tried to kind of strike that happy medium, but I'm sure it's something at least good for some light summer reading.
Rob, is it true that this book came out on at least like it was starting to be advertised towards the end of the third quarter of Game 6? I mean, is that like a real thing? Because there's no way. I just don't understand how you put this book together so quickly. Like, it just ended.
Yeah, I mean, Triumph Books contacted me. I would say the next morning after Game 2. So after the Mavs mounted that pretty incredible comeback, and it was like, oh well, they might actually have a chance to win this thing. And so from that point, we had to kind of work out some contractual work, and then I had travel days going between Dallas and Miami. But yeah, I mean, it was the final text was submitted the morning after Game 6, probably around 9 a.m. And so, I mean, a lot of it was just writing, everything except the finals ahead of time, whether it's the stuff about the regular season or the earlier playoff series, or there's some fun player profiles in there as well. So, all of that was constructed prior to the series actually finishing. And then once it pounded in, I mean, I was at the American Airlines Arena until, I want to say 4 a.m. and after Game 6, and then went home back to the hotel and just hammered out the rest of it until the deadline in the morning. But it was a bit of a grind, but hopefully it'll pay off by having it on those shelves really quickly.
Hey Rob, I was wondering why should we buy this book when you're younger than we are, and that makes us feel insecure? Wouldn't the best move for us to give you this publicity right here and then passive aggressively not buy the book out of resentment? Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, like I mentioned earlier, it's pretty photo heavy, really. So I would market it as the perfect gift for that picture book lover in your life, whether it's your 2-year-old nephew or your little brother, whoever it is. And so maybe buy it for them, and then vicariously, or kind of sneak it off to the side for some bathroom reading or whatever on the beach, and then sneak in a couple words here and there. But you can justify your purchase by buying it for maybe like a 6-year-old or something.
Well, there was about, I'd say everyone on the Mavs was old enough to have that 6-year-old. This was a really interesting team he got to cover. Okay, so the two things that stand out for me are, of course, like all these kind of very interesting, complex storylines that must have been very fun for you to follow, and then the ball movement. Where does that come from? Is that replicable? Or is that just sort of as freaky as the Heat's athleticism? The concentration of players who can move the ball and have a player like Nowitzki that has that gravitational pull to pull everything in and open up space to move it. Was that just as rare as the Heat's athleticism?
Maybe not just as rare, just because Miami's collection of talent is so profound, and I mean that's why they're going to click eventually. They're going to win the titles. It's really just a matter of time for the Heat. But with the Mavs, I mean, there's no question that this collection of players is really uncanny, and it's not maybe as rare as the Heat, but it's not easy to handball that make the right plays so many times over the course of a game. I mean, and that's what made Dallas great in the postseason is, when you really look at how they played in the clutch, it wasn't like the Mavs really got better at the end of games. They just kept doing what they were doing all the time. And so, that ability to consistently run their stuff and work the ball to the open man was just, I mean, it's incredible. And it's definitely replicable. It's just a matter of identifying the right players. And so a lot of that comes down to the coach and the general manager picking out the talent to comprise any roster. But, if you get the right players on your team, with the right star and the right formula, I don't see why this isn't replicable elsewhere.
Rob, there seems to be a meme out there that the Mavericks just sort of had a run of luck and happened to face these teams that collapsed at the right times. and that possibly they weren't the best team. How do you feel about that trope?
I mean, it would have taken a lot of luck. That's between Portland and then LA and Oklahoma City and Miami. I mean, those are some tough teams, and so to be able to and say that it comes down to luck, I think is a bit disingenuous. Obviously, the ball bounces here and there. Every time a shot goes up, you're playing with those probabilities, and so there's definitely an element of luck involved. Make no mistake about it, especially with some of the more miraculous comebacks that the Mavs are able to pull off. But their ability to do it consistently, and this isn't true just of this postseason or even the season, but if you look at the data, the Mavs are really one of the only teams that consistently buck the close game trends. They're Dirk and Jason Terry, and then Jason Kidd as well. I mean, Mark Hobner over at the Painted Area had a great post about the Mavs lineup this year and in winning time, quote unquote. And I mean, if you look at the numbers, it's phenomenal how well this collection of players is able to play with the game on the line. And so it's not a matter of other teams collapsing so much as that's the normal dynamic of a game. It's at the end of games, sometimes the offense tightens up, and it's a function of referee calling. It's a function of how the defense is playing. But Dallas, for whatever reason, this group of players is particularly well suited to close out games.
Rob, with the way the season ended, the regular season ended for Dallas, was there anything that you saw throughout the season that could have predicted that this run was going to happen? Like, did you really think that Dallas had a good chance of being the champions at the end of the postseason, or did it just seem like with the way they finished, it just wasn't there again?
I don't think the signs were there, and I think anyone that tells you otherwise is probably lying. Dallas, they didn't struggle at the end of the regular season. They actually played quite well. And, I mean, you can see some very micro things, like J.J. Barea really starting to hit a stride at the end of the regular season. But, overall, I mean, like, for example, in these NBA Finals, that defense was not there in the regular season towards the end. It was there at the very beginning when Tyson Chandler and Caron Butler were really starting to gel with the team. But by the end, with Beaubois really providing any kind of impact, the Mavs were a very good team who is probably going to get bounced in the second round by the Lakers. And I mean, there's a reason why I picked them to lose in the first round, lose in the second round. I picked them to lose in the finals. So the only round I really picked them to win was against Oklahoma City in the conference finals. And in retrospect, I don't feel like my logic was necessarily unfounded. And other people who would agree with that sentiment, I don't think their logic was unfounded either. I think the Mavs really struggled in a few particular areas, and they were able to hedge on those particular areas while building on some of their weaknesses. And so, the Mavs played really, really great basketball, and they were the best team in the playoffs. So, they weren't the best team in the regular season, and the signs may not have been there, but they definitely deserve what they won.